Welcome once again. This is Pinnacle Professional College, and today we bring you another lecture on strategic case study. If you haven't watched my previous lectures, please do so. It was very, very insightful and very, very helpful in preparation for your exam. So today we'll be talking about the life cycle model. The life cycle model. We touched on it briefly in our last lecture, but we'll be diving into it more. So in this section, we'll be talking about the classical product life cycle. We'll be talking about the cost implications of the product life cycle. We'll be talking about the relevance of the product life cycle and the cycle of competition. So let's begin. So when we talk about a life cycle, what do we mean, right? When you think about life cycle, just think about it in terms of, the life of a human being, right? The life of a human being. A human being is born, the human being will grow, the human being will mature, and then at a point, the human being will pass away. In the same vein, products too have life cycle. In the same vein, products too have life cycle. So products are born, they come new onto the market, then they grow, then they mature, and then they decline and they phase out. Now, a life cycle is the period from birth or creation of an item to the end of its life. Products, companies, and industries all have life cycles, right? So a product life cycle will typically begin with the initial development and end at the time that it is eventually withdrawn from the market. Very, very important. A product is said to go through several stages of demand, which we talked about, right? Just as a human being will go through different phases, products to go through phases. So the first phase is introduction, and I'll explain each of these phases. The second phase is growth. The third phase is maturity. Very, very important. And the last phase is decline. Now, what is the introduction phase? The introduction phase is a phase where the product is introduced to the market, and the product is newly born, and the product is introduced to the market. It's very, very important. Very, very important. And during this stage, a lot of people haven't come to know the product very, very well. It's new on the market. People are still trying to gain belief about the product, right? So people don't know it a lot, right? So in this phase, the sales or the demand for the product is low. So the demand is low, the sales is low, right? So that's on the revenue front. Very, very important. That's on the revenue front. On the cost side of things, at this stage of the product, it's, whoever created the product will put a lot in terms of investment, in terms of startup costs, in terms of running costs into the product. So costs are high at this stage. Very, very important. Very, very important. This is very, very key. So number one, sales and demand is low. Number two, costs are high. And so usually at this stage, the products will not be profitable. Now, just think of this in terms of like a human being. When a baby is born, right, because the baby is heavily dependent, you spend a lot of time with the baby, you would have to take care of the baby. There's a lot of costs incurred with the baby. This is a similar situation with a new product. When a new product is introduced to the system, demand is low, sales is low, costs are high, and because of that, it's likely that it will not make profits. Then you move on to the growth phase, right? During the growth phase, total sales demand in the market grows at a faster rate. Total sales demand in the market grows at a faster rate. So basically what we are saying here is that in the growth phase, the product begins to gain some traction and people get to know about the product, right? And so the product begins to gain some reputation in the market and begins to grow in the market, right? It's very, very important. So at this point, you see sales begin to peak a little bit or to rise a little bit, and there'll be high sales, because people are getting to know the product, people are getting to see that, oh, this product is effective, and then profits also would rise. Very, very important. This is the growth phase. Then you have the maturity phase. During the maturity phase, things stabilize, right? And profits will reach a peak. Annual sales will remain fairly stable, right? Things will stabilize. So it begins from the introduction at a very low level, it grows, and a maturity phase, sales will stabilize, profits will stabilize, and the opportunity to grow more and at a faster rate seems to slow down, right? Seems to slow down. Now, at the maturity phase, one of the things that smart companies do is to reinvent the product or to make updates or update the features of the product and reintroduce it to the market, right? So just think about it. When you look at Apple, I think every year or every couple of years, they release a new phone, right? Imagine if the first phone they released was the one that they are still selling. They will probably have died a long time ago. But because they are releasing and making updates to the older version of the phones they released, they reinvent themselves in the market, and that helps them to stay afloat in the market. More companies might seek to improve profit by differentiating their products more from those of competitors and selling to a niche market segment. Very, very important. Very, very important. So here, at the maturity phase, because growth has slowed down, sales is stable, profit is stable, companies will seek to differentiate their products just to make them stand out. Then you have the decline phase. At the decline phase, sales will begin to fall, profits will begin to fall, companies will think of leaving the market, and profits fall. Profits fall, and the product loses its reputation in the market, and generally things go south. So that's the decline stage. Very, very important. Very, very important. Now, this is a simple diagram that shows exactly what's happening here. A classical product life cycle is shown in the following diagram, right? You have the introductory phase. So just look at the axis. You have the y-axis, which is in terms of money, right? That's why you have the currency at the top, and the x-axis is showing time, right? So you have these four different phases, and then you have sales and profits in there. So at the beginning stage, right, which is the introductory phase, you see that look at where the sales and the profits and the profit curve are, right? The profit curve is below, in the introductory, is below the x-axis. It's below the x-axis. So you see that at this stage, profits won't be made. It's likely that the company would make a loss in the introductory phase. Then it begins to rise in the growth phase. And the maturity phase, you see that it's stabilized, and the decline phase, it drops. So you use sales and profit to describe each of these stages. So if you look at the introductory phase, you can tell that probably most likely losses are being made, sales is low. The maturity phase, sales are stabilized, profits have stabilized. The decline phase, things begin to decline. Now, not all products have a classical life cycle. That's why it's a classical life cycle, traditional life cycle. Unsuccessful products never become profitable. A business entity might be able to revitalize This was what I was talking about in terms of reinventing the product, right? So you can reinvent the product, update its features, and reintroduce it to the market. You can redesign the product and reintroduce it to the market so that sales can be increased again. The length of a product lifecycle can be long or short. The length of a product lifecycle can be long or short. A broad type of product, such as a motor car, has a longer life cycle than particular types of products. So some products will have a longer life cycle, others will have a shorter life cycle. Very, very important. At each phase of a product's life cycle, selling prices will be altered. Costs may differ. The amount invested may vary, and marketing activities may also differ, right? So at each stage of the life cycle, different things will happen. Different things will happen, right? The selling price might be different. So for example, if somebody is introducing themselves a product to the market, they'll probably have a low selling price so that people can, latch onto it first and then increase the price later. So selling prices change depending on the life cycle of the product. The costs and the investment may differ. And then the spending on advertising may also change. So for example, in the maturity phase, the product would have already gained a good reputation in the market. And so you might not spend as much in terms of advertising as you used to, right? So all these things influence or change depending on the stage in the life cycle. Now let's look at the cost implications of the product life cycle. Cost implications of the product life cycle. Cost implications of the product life cycle. Very, very important. Very, very important. Now, life cycle costing can be important in new product launches, as a company will, of course, want to make a profit from the new products. And the technique considers the total cost that must be recovered, right? So what are the cost implications? We are looking at one key thing you need to look at is R&D costs, research and development. You have to look at training. You have to look at production costs. You have to look at marketing costs. You have to look at disposal costs. You have to look at machinery costs. All these are costs that must be taken into consideration when looking at the product life cycle, right? So just remember this, right? When you think of a product, what are some of the associated costs? You need to market a product. You need to train people, who would probably sell the product. You need to produce the product, so it also comes with some production costs. You need to, before even creating the product, you need to do some research and development that also come with costs. So these are the cost implications of the product life cycle. So let's look at the stages, right? And look at the associated costs, right? It's very, very important. Now, you have the product development stage, right? And the product development stage, you have research and development costs. You have capital expenditure decisions, right? When you are trying to develop a product, you have to do your research and development first, right? So these are costs associated with that stage. Then when you introduce to the market, you have to, do a lot in terms of marketing and distribution. So marketing and distribution costs, as well as operating costs. That is when you are introducing to the market. Very, very important. Very, very important. Then you also have growth in the growth phase. In the growth phase here, you are looking at expanding capacity. So any cost associated with expanding capacity becomes very, very important. So cost of increasing capacity, increased cost of working capital, etc. These are all costs associated with the growth stage. And then you have the maturity stage. You have the maturity stage. In the maturity stage, you incur cost also to maintain the manufacturing capacity. So maintenance of the manufacturing capacity is also key here when it comes to the maturity stage. And then you also need to enhance the product at this stage. So costs related to marketing and product enhancement also become very, very crucial. Very, very crucial. Now, let's go on to the decline stage. When a product is declining, it has to be withdrawn from the market. And sometimes that withdrawal comes with some costs, right? Comes with some costs. So, like we are seeing here, close attention to costs needed, as withdrawal decision might be expensive, right? So withdrawing the product from the market can come with some costs. So let's go through the stages again. Number one is product development. It comes with what? Research and development costs. Introduction to the market, it comes with marketing and distribution costs. Growth comes with increasing working capital costs and increasing capacity costs. Maturity comes with the maintenance cost of the manufacturing capacity and product enhancement costs. And the decline phase comes with withdrawal costs. Right. So then you have the withdrawal phase, which is also here you do what we call asset decommissioning, right? Basically, what this means is that you are getting the product of the market. Just think about when a new project is being commissioned, right? Commission means to start. Asset decommissioning means to end the life of a product, take it off the market. So asset decommissioning costs, possible restructuring costs, and any remaining warranties to be supported. So these are the costs associated with each of these stages, which is very, very important to know. Now, life cycle costing compares the revenue and cost of the product over its entire life. This has many benefits. The potential probability of product can be assessed before major development of the product is carried out and cost incurred, right? Because we are assessing the revenue and the cost, we can determine the profitability of the product. We can determine the profitability of the product. And because of this assessment of the different stages, we can also use certain techniques to reduce the costs over the life of the product. To reduce the cost over the life of the product. Another benefit of the life cycle costing is, we can also determine the pricing strategy. What pricing strategy are we going to use? So for instance, are we going to start on a very, very cheap note? Right? Are we going to start on a very, very cheap note? And if we are going to start on a very, very cheap note, at what point are we going to increase our prices? At what point are we going to increase our prices? So these are all conversations around pricing strategy. These are all conversations around pricing strategy that has to be properly understood. Another benefit of the life cycle costing is that attention can be focused on reducing the research and development phase to get the product to the market as quickly as possible, right? So this whole life cycle costing helps, to speeding up the process. It helps speed up the process and get the product to the market as quickly as possible once you get your assessment of the different phases accurately, right? So that's the fourth benefit. Another benefit too is that you can actually monitor actual performance of the product against the plans. Because when you look at the life cycle of the product, right, you would have an expectation and then what actually happens might be different. So you compare the actual performance against the plans, and then any lessons to be learned from that, you can also learn it. Now, let's move on to the relevance of the product lifecycle to strategic management. The relevance of the product lifecycle to strategic management. Strategic management should consider the cash flows and probability of a product over its entire lifecycle. Very, very important. Very, very important. When a decision is being made about whether or not to develop a new product, management should consider the likely sales and returns over the entire life cycle, right? So the relevance of the whole product life cycle into strategic management is the considerations that are being made around cash flow, around revenue, around profitability, and also the insights it offers in terms of whether or not to develop the product, right? So when a decision is being made about whether or not to develop a product, management should consider the likely sales over the life cycle. So you are trying to figure out what will be the likely revenue over the life cycle, right? What will be the revenue? What kind of costs are we going to incur? And what kind of profits are we looking at? For existing products, management needs to assess the position of the product in the life cycle and what the future prospects could be, right? So you are trying to gauge and see what the financial projections will be in terms of the sales, the demand, the cost, the profits, etc. Now, one of the key things when it comes to products is about timing. Timing is very, very crucial when it comes to products. So timing market entry and exit. The product lifecycle concept might help companies to make strategic decisions about when to enter a market and when to leave it, right? So this whole product life cycle concept, it helps you to analyze strategically when to enter a market and when to leave it. So entrepreneurial companies might look for opportunities to enter a new market during the introductory phase in the expectation that the product will become successful, etc. Right? So if a company is very entrepreneurial, they might look for opportunities to enter a market during the introductory phase, right? And then if the company is very, very cautious, they might time their entry in the growth phase. This is about the market life, right? The market life. Another thing you need to know is that companies are unlikely to enter a market during the maturity phase unless they see growth opportunities. So what's all this about, right? Let me give some typical examples so you can understand it. Now, for example, if you look at the beverage, soft drink industry, right? It's a very, very mature market. There you have Coca-Cola has taken over, right? So if a market like that is in its maturity phase, an average person who is trying to start a soft drink business, will find it difficult to enter the market, penetrate it, and become successful in that market. So you have Coca-Cola and other, multi-billion organizations dominating the market already. So companies will not be likely to enter that kind of market, right? However, there are some markets that are in the introductory phase, right? So a typical example of a market that's in the introductory phase is probably something like let's say something like, so this market might either be in the introductory or growth phase. I'll probably put it so introductory or growth phase, but I would say it's in the introductory phase. So in the introductory phase, a market that's becoming, it's booming, it's space travel. So these days, people want to start a whole business around space travel, just like you can travel from Nigeria to, let's say, Nigeria to Papua New Guinea, right? These days, people are trying to commercialize space travel where you can travel from the Earth to space, right? This is a market in the introductory phase, and the entrepreneurial companies would look for opportunities like this. Startups will look for opportunities like this. Then there are more cautious companies looking for growth opportunities, and they might time their entry into the market until the growth phase. A typical example of a market in a growth phase, in my opinion, would be the electric car market or industry, right? You have Tesla in the market, and it's beginning to grow. So people are, trying to develop these cars, electric cars, So cautious companies will time their entry into the market until the growth phase, right? So when Tesla started electric cars, it was like an experiment. No one knew if it will work or fail. But now it's working and the market is in a growth phase and other people want to join, right? A company might need to make a strategic decision about leaving a market when the product is in its decline phase. Now, we already talked about this. Right, we already talked about this. Now let's talk about life cycle analysis as a technique for competition analysis. So this is also another benefit, right? You can use life cycle analysis to assess competition. Now, life cycle analysis is also useful for assessing strategic position and the nature of competition in the market, right? You can also look at your product in relation to other products when you are doing your life cycle analysis. The number of competitors in the market now and the number of competitors that might exist in the future will be influenced by the phase that the product has reached during its life cycle. Very, very important. So life cycle analysis can be used to understand competition. So let's talk about the cycle of competition. The cycle of competition. Now, when we talk about the cycle of competition, we are trying to understand the behavior of competitors in the market, right? All competitors are trying to do is to gain an edge, an advantage in the market. So when one company does something successfully, another company would look at it and try to do better so that they might gain an edge. A new initiative by one company results in a countermeasure from another company. Each company in the market tries to do something different and better. Very, very key. A typical cycle of competition affects prices and quality. Typical cycle of competition affects prices and quality. Right? So in a competitive market, depending on how the market structure is, it will affect price. Competition will affect price and quality. That's why you see some companies reduce their prices just to gain more people in the market. Others too would improve the quality of their products, to gain ascendancy in the market. The effect of a cycle of competition in a growing market is that prices fall and the quality might improve. So what competition does, a lot of competition does, and that's the benefit of competition, is that you see that prices will fall and quality will improve because everybody is competing against each other, right? So it pushes prices down and quality increases. Very, very important. In the maturity phase of a product's life cycle or in the decline phase, it becomes more difficult to lower prices without reducing quality, right? The maturity phase is a phase where things have sort of stabilized and it becomes very difficult to lower prices at this point, without reducing the quality. Competitors might try to gain a bigger share of the market by selling at a lower price, but the product quality might be reduced. This can lead to a spiral of falling prices and falling quality to the point where the product is no longer profitable. Yeah, so that's one key thing you need to know about the maturity phase. It's gotten to a point where the market is saturated and it becomes very, very difficult to lower prices without reducing quality. The concept of the cycle of competition, as I said, is very, very important when it comes to strategic analysis. So that's it when it comes to the life cycle model, right? Understanding the product life cycle. If you have any questions surrounding that, please leave a comment in this video and I'll definitely respond to it. Or if you have a question, you can ask. Now let's move on to the Boston Consulting Group matrix. The Boston Consulting Group matrix, the BCG matrix. So in the BCG matrix, the Boston Consulting Group developed a product market portfolio for strategic planning, right? So what's the BCG matrix all about? You have a product market portfolio, and I'll explain this as we go along. Very, very important. Now, this BCG matrix allows planners or strategic analysts to select the best strategy for products, while also ensuring that the strategies for individual units or products are consistent with the overall corporate objective. Now, I'll show you what all of this means. So please take and stay with me. Now, the BCG matrix is a 2x2 matrix. Now, you need to understand that the reason why it's a product market matrix is what I'm about to show you now. It's a 2x2 matrix. One side of the matrix represents the rate of market growth for a particular product. The other side of the matrix represents the market share that is held by the product. Right? So it's a 2x2 matrix, right? And you can clearly tell here that the two key things that are mentioned here is market and product. Market and product. On one hand, you are looking at the rate of market growth. On the other hand, you are looking at the market share. The market growth is basically how the market is growing year on year. The market share is basically showing the proportion of the market that is held or captured by a company or a product. Right. So the whole idea of the BCG matrix is to select the best strategy for individual products, right? When it comes to, a particular market, not forgetting that it should be in line with the overall corporate objectives. Very, very important. Now, let's look at market growth. The midpoint of the growth side of the matrix is often set at 10% per year. Right? So if a market is growing 10% year on year, that's an average, it's the midpoint. If it does above that, it's high. If it does below that, it's low. Right? 10% is just an arbitrary number, right? Just as a framework, sort of. It's very, very important. So you have market growth and you have market share, all in relation to the product. This is what makes this a 2x2 matrix. Always remember this. 2x2. You are looking at market growth, you are looking at market share. It's very crucial. Now let's look at market share. Market share is usually measured as the annual sales for a product or business unit, right? As a proportion of the total annual market sales. So you are looking at product sales and divided by market sales, right? So if you take, for example, let's say you sell soap, right? You sell soap, right? If you want to look at your market share, what you do is you look at the entire market, all the soap sellers, how much they are making in sales. Let's say it's $1 million, right? Then you look at you yourself, your product, right? Your product. How much is your product, your soap product making? let's say $200,000. If you divide $200,000 by $1 million, that's 1/5, which is 20%. So in that case, you have 20% of the market. So this is a typical example that's given you. For example, if the product of entity X has annual sales of 100,000 and total annual sales for the market as a whole, so its product divided by the market is 1 million, then the entity has a 10% market share. In the BCG matrix, however, market share is measured as annual sales for the product as a percentage of the annual sales of the biggest competitor in the market. This is in the BCG matrix, right? In the BCG matrix, market share is measured as annual sales for the product. Annual sales for the product as a percentage of the annual sales of the biggest competitor in the market. Now, this is very, very important because this is a slight twist. A slight twist. So in the BCG matrix, you are looking at the annual sales for the product in relation to the annual sales of the biggest competitor in the market, not the entire market, but the biggest competitor in the market. The midpoint of this side of the matrix represents a situation where the sales for the firm's product or business unit are equal to the annual sales of its biggest competitor, right? The logic here is that if a company is the biggest competitor, then it has a high market share. It has a high market share. It has a high market share. So the BCG matrix is shown as follows. The individual products or business units of the firm can be plotted. You can plot it on a graph. So I'm sure below would show that, yes, exactly. And then we would look at it and then we'll see how everything works here. So you see on the left side, you can see market growth. At the top, you see market share. All right, so you have market growth, market share, you have high and low, high and low. So on the side of market growth, you see high, it means high market share. If you see low, on the side of market growth, if you see high, it means high market growth. If you see low, it means low market growth. You see relative market share, see high relative market share, you have low relative market share. These are important to understand, right? So I would entreat you to critically understand these things because they are very, very crucial. They are very, very crucial. So there are 4 categories, which I'll explain in my next lecture. There's the question mark, there's the star, there's the cash cow, and there's the dog. Now, one of the things I didn't mention when it comes to the BCG matrix, the BCG matrix is simply the Boston Consulting Group matrix. Now, Boston Consulting Group is one of the biggest consulting firms in the world, and they came up with this matrix to look at product market dynamics. Product market dynamics. Remember, we talked about product market portfolio, right? So you are looking at product market dynamics and seeing how best you can align this analysis with overall corporate objectives. So this is where I'll end this lecture. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so. If you have any questions, leave it in the comment section. Thank you and have a good day. Bye-bye.